There we are,
Now
we're
we
right
are.
now.
Yes, that's how it all began.
That's how it began, exactly. And I can't remember whether you read my piece or I read your piece or something like that. And boarding school syndrome
Yes,
is really what we started talking about.
It was your piece on Jane Ratliff's.
Yeah,
it was brilliant. You just described it so well, and that severance between the head and the heart.
Yeah.
Thought about the men in my life who I know. All my family members have been to boarding school, and I think there's a similar feeling amongst women too who've been to boarding school. Maybe not quite so much. It's just like learning to disassociate and So
I wonder because you're right. There is a difference. There's a difference, and I'm not sure if it's the way it presents in boarding school men and boarding school women, or whether it affects us differently. But you're right about there is a difference, isn't there? And I don't. Can you nail what that difference is? I'll think about it at the same time.
I think that girls still are in touch with their feelings, but they've learned to mask them and not go there. Whereas I feel like men have more of a severance, as you put it.
Okay, an absolute cutoff.
Yeah, I feel like girls don't want to show their feelings so much, but they're still there very much. So,
Do you think that's a skill of the female of the species, that we're able to keep that thread? Like, what makes us capable of doing that? Because there must be boys who endeavored to do that and didn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you think that's a natural? Well, I don't want to say natural skill. That sounds weird, but do you know what I mean? How come we're able to do that?
It's a good question. Especially in England. I mean, we're both English, so it's just not very British to show your feelings and be over emotional. So I think it's a combination between boarding school and being British, because I know a few Americans who've been to boarding school over here, and it's different with them. They're very open and able about things and not afraid to show their feelings. So I think it's just instilled in us as a culture in Britain. And as you know, I grew up there. I was educated there. I've lived in America for probably longer now than I lived in England. So I've got a good sense of both cultures. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's all I've ever known within my family, because everybody went to boarding school, parents, siblings. It was just the thing you did.
Yeah. Well, likewise. I mean, we didn't, because both my parents were sent to boarding school. My mother was sent at 8 and my father was sent at 8, I think, as well. And although he wanted to put the boys down for Eton, she wouldn't let him, and sent us all to, well, here's the classic. She sent the girls to state school.
Mm-hmm.
The boys went to Hill House.
Right.
And then Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
And the girls went to state school, the local primary, the ILEA primary down the road. That's where I began, until 11. And then to a kind of really academically rubbish, or Queen's College. I mean, God love it, but you're never gonna be Oxbridge from Queen's College in those days, anyway. And I had to fight to be taken seriously as an academic human within my family because of my gender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's a perfect storm, isn't it, of British and boarding school. And I suppose women, culturally, our conditioning, like whether you go to boarding school or not, we are taught to keep everything inside. And so we sort of, if you have the fate of going to boarding school, you kind of, maybe you retain or you put that skill into action there rather than the severance.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which happens to boys.
I remember when I first started at boarding school, I mean, obviously I was only 6 years old, so I was
every time, I just can't bear it, Petra.
Yeah, I know.
Cannot bear
I'm
it.
disassociated from it, though. It's
I'm
only
sure you are. Yeah.
recently that I've started to really face it. But I remember 2 years in, aged 8, which is still tiny, when my younger sister arrived at the same school, age 6, I remember seeing her in floods of tears about, being dropped off at boarding school and having like a detachment about it. Because by that point, aged 8, I was just used to it. And this is just what you did. And, it's not that I didn't feel for her. I just, that wasn't me anymore. I wasn't, crying all the time. And I just learned to put on a mask and get on with it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Can you identify now as an adult, can you identify exactly where that damage shows up in the last 35 years in sort of decisions you've made, and can you see where it shows up?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the abandonment issues are the biggest one.
Yeah.
And the feeling of rejection as well, because that's what it felt like, is that I wasn't welcome at home, and then it was very hard to fit in at school for various reasons. Like I wasn't, all my issues started at the first school. Like by the time I was at my secondary school, I was 12 and way beyond my years because I'd been living away from home for so long. And that first school, just not knowing how to answer questions. All you want when you go to school, whether it's day school, boarding school, when you're new, you just want to make friends and fit in and not stick out and, not feel embarrassed. And I went thinking that it was going to be like the Enid Blyton books, and it was nothing like that at all. And I guess I hadn't processed my reality in my family, which is that I didn't have a father. So when everyone was asking me questions, and when I say everyone, I mean the older girls, because I was the youngest boarder in the school. There were no other girls in my year who slept at school. So I didn't have any friends in my class. So all these questions would happen during meal times and, just at odd times of the day. And I just never knew how to answer about who my father was. Like I hadn't even understood these things. They were really big things. And it was hard because I felt so embarrassed to not have answers. And then, as time went on and there was bullying and a lot of bullying, and I started to feel like towards the end of that first school that I really, wasn't wanted at home, and I wasn't wanted amongst, I made friends eventually, there were some, as the years went on, new boarders would arrive and female friendships became so important. That was another issue that came up early on, was attachment, because I didn't have anyone to attach to. So I'd have inappropriate attachments with friends. They became my everything. I knew them better than my own family. So when friendships broke up, as they do when you're little, it was just devastating. Like I wrote about it, I think, in one of my.
I read it this morning.
My first heartbreak was when a friend at school decided she wanted someone else to be her best friend, and it's not like a romantic breakup where you can just move on and surround yourself with friends and meet someone else. I had to see it every single day, and it was. I mean, I'll never forget that devastation. In every relationship that I went into later in life, I was sure that, they would leave me. And I was so terrified of that pain that I'd had with that friendship breakup at boarding school.
Yeah, I mean, formative doesn't even cover it. I don't know if you listened to or if you read Elizabeth Day's Friendaholic. And I had an amazing conversation. Yeah, I mean, it's such a vital book to have written because exactly that. There's no architecture, social architecture for the breakup of friendships, for the grief. And I think that was the thing that we focused in on more than anything, because I experienced that when I was 12. My first heartbreak was absolutely being dumped by a friend, and it just fucking killed me. It killed me, and there was nowhere to put it.
Yeah, yeah.
But for you at 6 and 7 and 8, I mean, you're not even formed, are you? It's just, it's a devastating story. And I've read a lot about you in the last week. I've been reading a lot through your brilliant posts and all the rest of it. And there just seems such an enormous amount to unpack. And I want to congratulate you, really. I want to congratulate you on being somebody who clearly, and these are the people, I'm always drawn to people like this who say, I'm going to meet life with honesty.
Yeah.
I'm going to meet the world with honesty.
Yeah.
And it's so, well, bold, as we've said before. It's bold and it's beautiful. And it strikes me every time I interact with anything you've written and every time we meet and all the rest of it. It is a decision. Would you agree with that? It's a decision to meet the world honestly.
Definitely. I was very honest. At my first boarding school, I always come back to boarding school because those 10 years were my formative years of going from childhood to adulthood. By the time I left at the age of 16, I mean, I felt like I'd lived 3 lives or something. I felt like I was an adult in the world, which I wasn't. I was still a child. But to begin with, I wasn't very honest because I wanted to fit in at school. Like, for example, I didn't want to have to answer questions about not knowing who my father was. It was too uncomfortable for me. And because I had the last name of someone else who at the time was very famous, I just said he was my father because it was easier, So that felt wrong inside. I wasn't telling a big lie. I was honest with like my closest friends, but it was just uncomfortable having to pretend that I was someone I wasn't. Even though I knew him and I loved him and he treated me as one of his own, and I have several older siblings who are his children with my mother. I just felt so it just didn't feel right to have to pretend. And so that's why I was constantly, when I was at home, asking my mother, please tell me who my father is. And it was a subject that was just completely off limits. I wasn't allowed to know. It was either, I'll tell you one day, or just anger, just changing the subject. So I stopped bringing it up. But once I got to my second school, girls were a bit more, older girls were more compassionate and interested. And I formed close friendships with girls who weren't in my year. We had this weird system at school called crushes, not as in fancy. But you choose an older girl to be your crush. And it's sort of like having a surrogate big sister. So I would open up to those sorts of girls, and they really, they understood as best they could. And it felt good to be able to be honest. It was almost therapeutic. And I mean, it's not like they could advise me anything. I think one of them told me to write a letter to someone, which I did, someone who I suspected was my father. And that was devastating because he didn't reply. It was just, it could sort of consumed me, this identity problem I had, and being able to just fit in. Like I said, it was easier at the second school because older girls are a little bit more forgiving, but it still made it difficult to form normal connections because there was always something missing with me.
Why do you think she didn't want you to know?
Good question. I mean, she says it was to protect me, but I don't see how it was protective. She would say things to me sometimes like, sometimes it's better not to have a father. All men are rats. They can't be trusted. They're all terrible. And at a young age, I believed that. I became really scared of men unless they were my brothers or, my stepfather, my other father. I was never around them. I had girls around me at school, and then when I was at home, I was with nannies. So I didn't know how to be around or talk to men, and fatherhood became this like dark and scary subject.
It's fascinating. And at what point? How old were you when you found him?
I was
18, is that 18?
Yeah.
And so, just can you unpack something a little bit for me? So you became your sister. You found out were your sisters. Who was it who suggested the DNA test?
Well, so what happened when I was 15 and still at boarding school? Weirdly, I'm the exact same age as my biological father's twin daughters. We were born a month apart. And they were going to public school in England. That's why I said in one of my posts, it would have probably been best if, I was born in America. We probably should have just stayed in America, and then none of this would have happened the way it did. Because I don't think I probably would have ever met my father if fate and these events hadn't taken place. So at 15, I was out one night with some friends in London, and a boy who knew my sisters asked me if anyone had ever told me I looked like one of them. And I'd never heard the name. I didn't know anything about her, but I remembered the name, obviously, once he said it. And then I saw a picture of the twins, their identical twins, in a magazine about a year later, because they were debutantes and there was like a coming out ball, and there they were. And I remember thinking I did actually look quite like one of them. And so I brought that up to my mother, and she mentioned she'd had a relationship with their father. So I already had a list of suspects in my mind, and he just joined that mental list. And 2 years after that, I was out in a nightclub in London and met one of the twins. She introduced herself, and we became friends immediately and chatting. And she said she was having a birthday party like two months later, and would I like to come? And she'd introduced me to her father, and that's how it happened. The meeting. I met him at a party, and he didn't know I existed. He didn't know he had another daughter he'd forgotten about that night with my mother all those years ago. I think both my parents had a lot of relationships, dalliances, whatever you want to put, going on at that time. So it was probably easy to lose track of who was who. And then so after that night, the twins apparently said to him, Petra doesn't know who her father is, and, you knew her mother. Do you think there's any chance you might be her father? Because people say we all look alike. And he said, no, absolutely not. The dates don't match up. Her mother and I had an affair 5 years before she was conceived, or a long on and off affair. It went on for years. I mean, the 70s, I think, were a crazy decade in London for a lot of people. And then I guess they sparked his curiosity, because he told them to invite me over for a drink to his house. And this was about a week or so after the party. And
you still didn't know at this point?
No.
You didn't know?
I mean, to be honest, as you read, I sort of hoped he wasn't my father because of the way he was with me at the party. He couldn't have been less interested. I mean, the eye contact was probably a second at most, like just looking behind me and no interest whatsoever. And I just thought he was rude, because it was such a big moment for me. I thought this could be my father, and I'd been obsessing about meeting my father one day, and it was just such a letdown. I hoped he wasn't. So when they invited me over to his house for a drink, and it was just the four of us, he was much more interested that night. He was talking to me with eye contact. And the way he says it is that he noticed that I had a similar mannerism with my hand, the way I twirled my hair, as one of his daughters. And he said that's when he suspected that they were probably right. And he had nothing to lose at that point because he was on his way to prison. Great timing.
Great timing.
He suggested the DNA test.
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to pursue it. And it's really how narratives change, because he gave an interview not that long ago saying I asked for the DNA test, but I remember everything, and I certainly didn't ask for the DNA test, but I agreed to do it because I didn't think he was. I felt like there was such a disconnect between us at that party that I just didn't think it could be possible that we were related.
Is that why you didn't want to pursue it?
Yeah, I didn't want to know the truth. I was afraid. I thought, I don't think he is my father, but if he is, this is going to open up a whole new world for me.
Okay.
And I really didn't think it would be positive. Like the
test.
Yeah, and I suppose I said yes to, because I was a people pleaser, which is one of the many effects of childhood trauma.
Boarding school.
So I just when he said let's do a DNA test, I didn't know how to say no, so I said okay.
Okay.
And went along, like I think I was hungover. I was just like la di da, didn't really of it. And the worst part of the results was that the doctor said, how do you both want to receive your results? And he said, call me. And I said, send me a letter. Because this was still in the 90s where mail, like normal letters. I said, send me a letter to my London address because I'd like to read it and, process it in my own way. So that was all agreed. And I don't know how long later, however long it took for the lab to come back, I was sitting in my renting a room in a friend's house, completely stoned. I'd been smoking marijuana all day, just having, a relaxed afternoon, and the phone rang, and it was my father. It wasn't the doctor. It was my father ringing, and he said, good news, I'm your father. That's how I found out. I just said, I have to call you back. Hung up and just went up to my bedroom and realized that everything was forever changed.
So you knew of all of the people it could have been, of the list in your head, did you feel when his name was added to that list that it was you said, I knew this would open a can of worms. Was there a bigger can of worms attached to his name than any other possibles? Would you have had the same response if it had been any of the others on the list, do you think? Like, was he the kind of, I really hope it's not him moment, like, instinctively?
I did have I hope it's not him. And I'll tell you why. Because when I first mentioned his name to my mother, this is 2 years before the DNA test, and this is why I'm not sure if she even really knew who my father was at the time.
Okay.
I say she did. I mean, both my parents will say other things, of course, but she told, when I mentioned him to her, he was in the news. He was, a libel case had gone wrong and everything had fallen apart. There was a famous speech he'd given, which was a lie, where he was, you can look it up on YouTube about the British Shield of Fair Play. I don't know. He looked furious in the speech because he's like ready to fight the the Guardian newspaper and bring down the media. And that was the first time I ever saw him, was on television, like looking angry. And when I mentioned him to my mother that night over dinner, because I was always trying to figure out, who was around her when I was conceived, because she wouldn't tell me anything. That was my only way of trying to figure out where I came from, was by asking her questions and looking through whatever was lying around at home, whether it be photos or documents, because, that was one way of gathering information.
Yeah.
And when I mentioned his name, she said that they'd been engaged and that she broke off the engagement because of a very dark side of him, which she went into graphic detail. And no child should ever know those things about their father. And that's why I hoped it wasn't him.
Okay. I'm just digesting that.
Yeah.
For a minute.
Well, to make matters worse, when I found out he was my father and, I started getting to know him, he told me some horrific things about my mother that no child should know about their mother. So they both behaved completely inappropriately with me. And I now have got to a point where I realize, well, why would they have behaved any other way? It wasn't like they planned me. I wasn't born into a loving family to be raised in a conventional way. I sort of came along by accident. So, why would they honor each other and speak well of each other and protect my psyche from things I just wish I didn't know but can never forget?
No. Yeah, there's something you wrote about, I'm sure it's something I read of yours, about their narratives being more important than loving their child.
That's why I don't speak to my mother anymore, because she values her relationship with Jonathan, my father, more than she values her relationship with me, which is just mind-boggling, really, because they weren't. I mean, who knows if they were engaged or not? Who knows if they loved each other or not? I'll never know the truth. But yeah, she just proved herself a couple of years ago that her narrative and her reputation and the way he saw her was more important to her than her relationship with me. And I know you read that post about the time I saw them for the first time together as my parents. I'd never been in the same room as both my parents, and she turned up at that dinner more interested in reconnecting with him than making it about a special moment for me. It was really odd.
One of the complexities that really stands out for me in that is, on the one hand, you as a child and as a young adult doing what all children and young adults do who don't know their parentage, is to hunt those pieces of the puzzle down, which is an absolutely instinctive act. And then on the other hand, having the Pandora's box that it opened up, creating such pain, just in terms of the relief of a puzzle making sense versus the picture that the puzzle revealed. For you, do they balance, or is there an imbalance there in terms of your experience now, having completed that?
Well, it's weird because when my mother used to say to me as a child, sometimes it's better not to have a father. In some ways, she was right, because it didn't work out with my father. I mean, we're estranged,
Yeah.
And I do think about, would it have been better if I just never found out the other half of my identity? I think it would have always been within me, the wondering and the wishing and fantasizing about having a father. But I think that I would have learned to deal with it as I learned to deal with being sent to boarding school and various other things in my life. I would have just got on with it. By having that missing piece of the puzzle and knowing everything, I wasn't prepared for, because I didn't think about complexities like siblings, other siblings that I didn't know,
Right.
ex-wives, and those things weren't on my mind when I was looking for my father. All I was thinking about was finding out who made me. And yeah, of course I wondered sometimes, like, oh, I wonder if I have other sisters and brothers, but I didn't go into like deep thought about what our relationships would be like or how they would treat me or anything like that. So everything just seemed to get much more complicated once the puzzle was solved. So now I would say it would have been easier and better for me, I think, if I hadn't learned the truth.
Wow, really?
I did.
Okay, that's so fascinating.
Just because I mean, if it had worked out, then great.
Sure.
It would have been a happy ending to a story that plagued me for years. But it wasn't a happy ending. It was, the fact that I am estranged from my two elderly parents is never anything I imagined or wanted.
Mm.
Usually people who have parents in their mid-80s want, to be in touch with them all the time. I mean, different relationships. I know you
Yeah.
a long time. You don't want to be completely estranged and not have any communication whatsoever. It's just sad it had to end up this way, but it's for the best.
Yeah, I mean, there's an estrangement in my life, and it's sad. Of course, it's fucking sad.
Yeah.
But there is a but to that, which is that in the process of it arriving at that place where I said, and I think this is, you're in the place you're in because you said enough, right?
Yeah.
And I said enough. I didn't say it to that person, but I said it to their behavior as their behavior tried, you know what I mean? So because with actual family estrangement, it doesn't really necessitate a big showdown and I'm never talking to you again and that's not how it works. It works by just, for me anyway, this is my experience of it, with something happening which is the last fucking straw. And suddenly, again, in terms of pictures coming into focus, suddenly it's like, okay, this is never going to change. The behavior of that person has been their behavior all the way along. And I've tried, because I love them, to imagine that it will change. I haven't tried to change them, but I've imagined, just as we do with, and it's more difficult with parents. I wasn't estranged with my parents at all, but, I wasn't very close with my mum. But we weren't at all estranged. I know she loved me. So I think, so I know when it's a parental estrangement, there's that constant, like, childlike, maybe this time will be different, that leaping for the fantasy of what they might be. And then the moment comes when you just go, actually, you kind of wake up, don't you? And just think, this is never going to change. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take myself out of the ring. But that moment for me, which has happened relatively recently, it has given me something.
Yeah.
It's given me a sense of where my boundary is and what I will tolerate and what I will not tolerate. And so even as a kind of, it's a violent way of understanding that, but I did need, nothing else had taught me that. I think that's what I'm driving at. So, I mean, I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm always trying to find like the good out of something.
Yeah.
So even though estrangement is awful, the good that's happened is I found what I will tolerate and what I will not tolerate.
Yes. Yeah. For me, that moment really came very late. it was after I got engaged and wedding planning, and I had this fantasy of my family members all being in the same room and a very
I know.
happy.
I mean, it's a beautiful night, isn't it? I mean, but it comes from a very beautiful place of like, maybe this time,
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah,
based on fact at
yeah.
all.
Hope
No.
died last.
Oh, it
um,
does. It really does.
and it just went the other way in such a horrible way that I couldn't. It was just, yeah, that was I thought that was the final straw. I did give them another chance. A friend of mine encouraged me, and I went to London with my husband after we'd eloped so that he could meet my parents, because he'd heard so much about them. And it felt like the right thing to do. And I've, opened the door yet again to being hurt and
Yeah.
disappointed. And
Yeah.
it just, again, went spectacularly wrong. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just so extreme, it like, there's no middle ground. And it just, I would have been an absolute fool to keep trying after that. So that was it for me. And, you know, because they're still alive and they just can't believe I'm not speaking to them. They've behaved quite inappropriately recently, and they never met my father-in-law. They teamed up and wrote him a letter a few months ago, not asking if I was okay or any real concern. It was more like the tone was, there's obviously something very wrong with her and you must know, and trying to sort of get them on to their side, build a case against me. Like, I'm a married woman in my 40s. The tone of the letter was like I was a teenage runaway and they were parents who'd been in my life, which they hadn't. It was absolutely bizarre. And, you know, it's like you can't win either way. Keep them in your life, you get hurt. Leave them, they come back and get you. It's just non-stop.
Yeah, and it strikes me, and this is my experience, but as you're speaking, it strikes me as well that what happens is the death of a collusion in magical thinking. But that doesn't mean that the magical thinking doesn't carry on with those who wish for it to carry on. But my magical thinking, which was that somehow they would be different next time, ended. That died, and there's a grief there, I think, as well, isn't there? That's my experience. There's the
Yeah,
grief in, oh, okay, no, that the years of trying and the years of magical thinking around that this time they'll be different, and yeah, it's a terrible loss without death, isn't it? Like a loss in life. Rather than I don't really grieve the family member,
hmm,
but I really grieve the 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 loss of innocence in me, like the innocent me that tried and tried and tried.
yeah, yeah. And it's a mixture of grief and a little bit of guilt, although I don't tend to feel that so much anymore. And um anger at myself for not, like, getting it together and realizing things sooner, and
Mm.
wasting a lot of time, and wishing I could go back. I remember reading an interview. David Bowie's son gave an interview around the time when he was promoting his film. And the interviewer asked him if he had any sort of a relationship with his mother. And he said in the interview, I made a decision, I think he was about 18 or 19, to not have anything to do with my mother anymore. And it was the best decision I ever made. And I remember feeling envious when I read that, because I thought, wow, to have
Oh,
strength and conviction to just know that you need to walk away that early on. Like, there was,
yeah,
I could have done that. But I suppose he had a great father, um, who was there for him. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
How do you, I mean, for instance, when the arrows still come at you, even though you've shut the door and they can't actually, you're not engaging with them anymore, but when they still come at you, what's your internal strategy for that?
What kind of arrow? Like,
Like the letter,
oh,
to your father-in-law.
I
Yeah.
that like killed any chance of me wanting to re-engage with.
Okay.
Like, why take it that far? Why
Mm.
not contact me directly? I mean, I might not reply, but it's not like I don't read emails. They also have my husband's contact details. Why did they have to go to his father, who they've never met? It was just such a weird thing to do, and so inappropriate and so invasive of the life I've, built without them. And the arrows that come to me now, I suppose, are just disbelief. It's still hard for me to get my head around the circumstances I was born into, and I try to, I try not to like feel self pity, because that doesn't
Mhm.
go anywhere. But at the same time, it's been a lot to have to come to terms with, and it's taken up so
Mm.
much time and energy that I feel frustrated to be such a late starter in life and to have had this arrested development, and that I had to like go through so much while everybody else my age was like doing stuff like going to university and getting jobs and, you know, starting families. And I just couldn't do any of that because I had so much to come to terms with. And there
Mm.
were repercussions that aren't just to do with my relationship with my parents that got in the way of my way, just life. There's just
Mm.
so much, and it's been exhausting, and I just feel relieved now to be finally living, but I just wish it wasn't so late in the day.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, two questions. I suppose, reading back through all of your posts and getting a real picture of your life as I've done for the last week or so, I kept on thinking, how do you contextualize and make sense of such complex, so many blows and so many layers and so many, are you able to make sense of it now? Like in that very simple question, like, why have all have all these things happened to me? Why is there an answer to the why? Like, what was this? Is there a like, what was this leading for? And what am I here for? And all those kind of like, they're very childlike questions, but they're also very profound questions. Are you able to make sense of it all, or begin to make sense of it now?
The disbelief is really about the parenting, because
Okay.
I'm not a parent myself, but I have plenty of friends who are parents, and I know enough about parenting to know that a mother or a father, usually they want what's best for their child, and they want to set them up to win in life, and they want to protect them and make them feel loved. And my father wasn't around till I was 18, so I can't really blame him for not being a good dad. But I cannot understand why my mother sent me to boarding school at the age of 6. I was her seventh child, so it wasn't like, she hadn't been you tried parenting before me, and clearly
Mm.
she just didn't want me around. I mean, I was inconvenient.
Yeah.
And just to not have any safety net, to not feel like I had a home to come home to, like school was home. And it was so backwards because all my school friends loved going home. And I remember my younger sister would cry her eyes out when we had to go home. And that's one time
Yeah.
when I realized how backward things were, that it wasn't our safe place. Um,
Mm.
School was where we lived. And
Mm.
obviously, I didn't understand all these things back then. But now, looking back and having written these boarding school posts, I just don't understand why. What was the point in even having me? I mean, I'll never have that answer. But, you know, what's the point in having children to send them off, have them raise nannies during the holidays? And I don't really have that many memories of my mother until I was about 13. I mean, she was fleeting, in and out. And then after the age of 13, instead of sort of trying to become friends with me and form some sort of later life relationship, she was a very scary, intimidating presence in my life and very dictatorial, like a tyrant. She wouldn't let me have friends or have any sort of life, and um, punishments that were severe. And it was horrific. You know, I ran away from home many times, and just I don't understand any of that. So that's really the disbelief is why she bothered having me. It, like, did she have me to torture me? Was it so that I spend my whole life having to overcome all this stuff that no child should have to deal with? No child has a perfect life. No child has a perfect parent, but you do the best you can to make sure that they have an okay time of it. Whereas I felt like she made things so much harder for me than they needed to be. And that I get pretty upset about sometimes, because I just think it wasn't fair, it wasn't right. And, you know, people are very judgmental. They make assumptions. They think of me as privileged. And yes, I know I'm privileged in many ways, but they don't know the reality of what I had to go through, and still having to heal from. You know, it was extreme, and there's stuff I haven't even shared that, you know, I'll eventually get to a point where I can write about, but, you know, it's a lot.
I mean, abuse cloaked in wealth is a very particular kind of torture that I relate to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I know you've been through the dismissal and minimization, and, you know, I know you've been through some pretty horrible things too, and your family just didn't want to know, didn't want to acknowledge the severity of it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think specifically as well that I always felt like a poor little rich girl. That was always, I felt, you know, because on the exterior, you were incredibly privileged materially, like super privileged. But that meant that there was no space to put what was happening. There was no space to put it anywhere. And it meant, yeah, that disassociation and that particularly when you said trying to understand, and I tried to understand for an enormous amount of time, and I've come to the conclusion now, with the help of really good professionals, that actually it is inexplicable. It cannot be understood. There isn't a clear understanding. You know, if you can't be there to love your children and care for them and give them the best you can give them, whatever that is, don't fucking have them. It's really simple. Just don't have them.
Yeah.
It's fine. You don't have to have children. It's really fine.
Yeah.
Because to have them and then neglect them is just, whatever your material background.
Yeah.
It is inexplicable. It is inexplicable that somebody could do that. And I know within my own circumstances, there are a million contextual reasons why those circumstances were allowed to continue for as long as they did. But nevertheless, it is an absolute abdication of duty. There's no, isn't it? That's the bottom line. And I think arriving at that place felt like a very solid place to land for me. Because I could stop trying to understand the inexplicable. It is inexplicable that you'd have a daughter. I mean, now I'm talking in your case, that you'd have a daughter and then treat her as you were treated. It's, you know.
With the provision, I know you come from a family of wealth and inheritance, and that was the assumption for me too, because I was at a very expensive boarding school, and my last name at the time everyone assumed massively wealthy, but the reality was I was being like sent to school with £2 for pocket money for the term, whereas everyone else, had enough to get their way through. And just little things like that. And then, it was shame. I felt very ashamed of those sorts of things. And the fact that there wasn't provision. Like when I left home, I was on my own. There was absolutely no support, emotional, financial. And that was really hard, making my way through the world, because the assumptions, and it's just a different kind of difficulty than people who don't grow up with privilege have to endure.
Yeah, that's another layer, which, yes, is specific to you and was not. I had wealth, and that never stopped, and I'm grateful for it in many ways. But I'm aware, yes, that your life gave the illusion of great wealth, but actually it was a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. We would have been, my brother, sister, and I would have been better off with different last names. I mean, I'm very proud to carry my late stepfather's name, but it certainly didn't do us any favors going to school and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I meant right at the beginning of this, but I'll say it now, that I read an earlier post of yours that's called, I've lost it now, but it's called Wednesdays at 10.
Yes, that's what led me to Substack. Yeah.
And Anita Bookie.
Yeah. I'm looking at her framed photo right now.
I've had her picture up in front of me while we've been talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to dedicate this. I want to dedicate this hour to her.
Absolutely.
And bring her into the room. And I wanted to ask you, could you talk to me about the impact of meeting her and what she meant to you?
Absolutely. It happened by chance that I found her. I was in a horrible corporate job, and the only good thing about it was I had great health insurance. And so I was able to find a therapist because I was starting to spiral into a really dark time in my life. This is back in 2018. My family were not there for me. The ones in America, they knew what was going on, but nobody wanted to be there. So I needed professional help. And thanks to my health insurance, I was able to find a therapist, and the company sent me a list of therapists in my area. And I was renting a room in a friend's place at the time on the Upper West Side. And I just went through alphabetically and called A's and B's, and her last name was Bookie. And the second I heard her voice, I just knew she was amazing. There was something about her, and I went in to see her, and her kindness, she just had this deep understanding about her, and compassion and kindness. Like, never underestimate kindness in life. Like, it can save your life, and she did. She was my guiding light. And even after I lost that job and I didn't have the health insurance, she carried on seeing me. I mean, through COVID, we couldn't see each other in the office, but we'd speak on the phone, and she let me call her day and night. And the relationship changed from therapist and patient to more of a family member. And she just never stopped believing in me and was just there for me in my darkest times. And I'll be grateful to her forever for that, because she just just knowing that somebody cared, it felt like nobody cared. And just, that's a horrible feeling, because it's true in life, aren't that people who truly care. And I'd got to a point where I felt like there was no point in going on, and there was no, like, I had some really heavy things happening all at once. And Anita even said to me that in her 45 years as a therapist, she'd never worked with someone who had so many things happen at once, on top of the like early traumas. I don't know why things happen the way they did in 2018, but that's something I'll write about one day.
Yeah.
And I hope that getting through it, thanks to Anita, the strength it took to get through that will inspire people who feel like all is lost and there's no point in going on, because I know exactly how that feels. So yeah, she left a lasting impression for life, just for being there, just knowing I had someone who truly cared about me. It was really a special gift.
I mean, any time somebody is bold enough and resourced enough to talk, as you've just talked about, your mother and that relationship, and your father and boarding school, and we didn't get even into your sisters, but the body blows that you've received, and then the consequential events that have happened to you as a result of all of those. Anybody who shares that, when people hear it, it helps everybody who hears it, who can relate. There's just no question, because it's human to human, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think it was Clover Stroud. I read something about how she likes to share what happened and how she's feeling, because by doing so, it makes others feel less alone. And it's true. I read words from you or Clover or anyone who's been through a lot and feels deeply, and able to put words to it. It does make you feel less alone. And so if I can do that for other people, that will be my gift,
Yeah. There's something about local, as in oneself, local articulation with everything that we're going through, that has, the more local we are about it, the more global its reach. That's been my experience, rather than trying to, it just feels to me like, again, actually meeting ourselves honestly. And then, I'd like Clover and like you, if you do have the skill of being able to articulate that and write it, or whatever your discipline is, there's no question that single point of light becomes worldwide. People, and then they immediately, and this is my experience, you can immediately relate it and impose your own experiences. Names change, circumstances change, but there's a truth that runs through it, and it does. And that sense of being not alone, because obviously, to some extent, we're alone in our bodies, and here we are. But it's such as opposed to magical thinking, it's an illusion to think that we're not another myself. You are another myself, and I know that. And that's the truth of it. And as we talk and we meet in this incredibly honest, trusting place, I can feel you and you can feel me. And that's what's really doing the talking. Like, the words are coming out of my mouth, but what's talking is this other thing, which is about trust and love and kindness. And that's what has global reach in my experience. So it's holy work, I think.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. It is. Yeah.
And Anita, I'm looking at her face. She has such a beautiful face.
I know.
Wowza.
Her memorial was one of the most beautiful funerals I'd ever. It was just such a celebration of life, and what a remarkable person, and how lucky I was to know her for 4 years. But she changed my life. She saved my life. And yeah, a huge inspiration to me. So I have her to thank for starting my Substack. She would always ask me writing, because I stopped writing for a while completely. I just had a disappointment with an agent and I sort of went into my shell and I just journal. But she encouraged me to start putting myself out there again. And I think it was about a year after she died, I just finally summoned the courage to start a Substack. And amazing. I just passed my 2-year Substack.
I know. And do you know that you're the kittenesque, by the way, I'm wearing this shirt in your honor.
I love it.
Do you know that the Peter Levine book, Waking the Tiger?
Yes. Yeah.
It's the tiger. So whenever I look at kittenesque, what I think is Waking the Tiger, Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, complex PTSD.
And it's
just that circle goes round in my head every time.
Well, that picture is a photograph of a Delacroix painting.
Yeah.
Museum that I just thought was incredible.
I'm
loving this whole experience, and it's connected me with people like you and on video. I never imagined I'd do stuff like this.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? I know.
Yeah.
And I just feel impelled to say, Petra, you didn't deserve to be treated like that. I'm going to say it super clearly. You did not deserve to be treated like that.
I hope that one day I can reconnect with my younger sister who I'm estranged from, because I think that was one of the, I mean, it's a long and complicated, we don't have time for it now, but we deserved better. And I wish I was able to be there for her as a better older sister when she needed me. But I have my own shit to deal with. And
yeah. Well, life is long. You never know.
Never know what can happen. Exactly.
Yeah. So we're at an hour. I'm not going to take any more of your time. It's been really amazing.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see you in New York, by the way. I'll be there, hopefully.
In May. Yes.
Yeah.
See you there. Thank you for creating this space. And, it's been wonderful talking to you, Eleanor. So thank you. And I've pre-ordered your book. I'm really excited.
Hey, thank you very much. Everybody pre-order my book, please. Do what Petra does. Thanks, doll. Okay. Well, loads of love. Thank you.
Lots of love.
And I'll see you in May. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.